The news of humanity's victory at Kepler spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every inhabited system knew that the species once dismissed as primitive children had achieved what the greatest civilizations could not. The Devourers, unstoppable for months, had been not just defeated but utterly routed by human forces. Admiral Morrison found himself receiving communications from across Consortium space. The Zelhari High Council, speaking through harmonics that now carried notes of respect rather than condescension, formally requested access to human adaptive technologies. The Vorthek collective consciousness reached out through channels that had never been used to contact individual species before, asking to learn coordination methods that did not rely on psychic links. The Nomari conclave sent energy projections that flickered with genuine curiosity about human creativity training. Most surprising of all, Gorthik himself appeared on Morrison's viewscreen, his massive form somehow seeming smaller than it had 4 years ago. "Admiral Morrison," the Bruthan warrior spoke with careful formality, "I have observed human combat techniques in action. I request permission for Bruthan forces to train alongside human marines. We have much to learn about tactical flexibility." Morrison accepted these requests with the same polite respect he had always shown, but behind his diplomatic smile lay the satisfaction of justice finally served. The same aliens who had assigned humanity to galactic backwaters now desperately sought human leadership and knowledge, but the greatest test was yet to come. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. The Devourers had regrouped and were returning with their full force, determined to crush this new resistance before it could spread throughout the galaxy. The final battle took place above Nexus Prime, the same neutral station where humanity had first been dismissed as irrelevant. Every ship the Consortium could muster joined the defense, but even combined, they were vastly outnumbered by the machine intelligence that had decided to end the human threat permanently. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberation and watched the tactical displays with calm determination. Around him, human officers worked alongside alien counterparts who were finally learning to see humans as equals. In some cases, they were learning to see humans as teachers. Dr. Blake coordinated dimensional fold operations that brought human reinforcements from across the galaxy. Her mastery of space-time manipulation now surpassed anything the Zelhari had achieved with their crystalline technology. Captain Turner led mixed squadrons where human ships fought alongside alien vessels in formations that maximized both species' strengths while covering their weaknesses. Commander Mitchell commanded a joint task force that included Nomari entities who had learned to fight using physical weapons alongside their energy abilities. The aliens discovered that human tactical thinking could enhance their natural capabilities in ways they had never imagined. Colonel Hayes directed ground operations where Bruthan warriors employed subtle strategies rather than relying solely on brute force. Vorthak forces maintained coordination through human-taught methods even when their psychic links were disrupted. Zelhari units began employing creative tactics. They had learned from observing human adaptability, but the real key to victory came from something deeper than technology or tactics. Dr. Chun had spent 5 years studying not just alien biology, but alien psychology and human potential. Her final insight changed everything about how the galaxy understood intelligence and capability. The Devourers were designed to counter 4 specific types of civilization, Chun explained to Morrison, as the battle raged around them. Technological perfectionists like the Zelhari, collective consciousnesses like the Vorthek, energy manipulators like the Nomari, physical powerhouses like the Bruthan. Each approach has strengths and corresponding weaknesses. Morrison nodded as he watched human forces coordinate with alien allies in ways that transcended traditional species boundaries. And humans. Humans are generalists? Chun continued. We have no single overwhelming strength, so we develop the ability to adapt and learn and combine different approaches as needed. But more than that, we have something the machines cannot process. We can inspire other species to transcend their own limitations. On the tactical displays, Morrison could see the proof of Chun's words. Zelhari ships were employing creative strategies they had learned from humans. Vorthak forces were showing individual initiative while maintaining collective goals. Nomare entities were fighting with hybrid energy-physical techniques they had developed through human training. Bruthan warriors were using sophisticated tactics rather than simple, overwhelming force. The Devourers, faced with opponents who no longer fit their program parameters, began making critical errors. Their algorithms could not process enemies who constantly evolved and adapted. Their decision trees failed when confronted with coordination patterns they had never encountered. The final breakthrough came when Maria Santos activated her greatest creation. Using hybrid technology that combined innovations from all 5 species, she created a feedback pulse that disrupted Devourer programming on a galactic scale. The machine intelligence that had seemed unstoppable suddenly found itself fragmented and confused. Its unified consciousness shattered into billions of individual units with no coordination. In the aftermath of the pulse, human forces led coordinated strikes that eliminated Devourer manufacturing facilities throughout the galaxy. But more importantly, they did so alongside alien allies who had learned to fight as a unified force while maintaining their individual species identities. The war ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The Devourers, their central intelligence destroyed, became raw materials for rebuilding the worlds they had consumed. The Consortium, no longer a collection of competing species, became a true alliance based on mutual respect and shared capabilities. 1 year later, General Stone stood in the same chamber where humanity had first been dismissed as irrelevant. The alien delegates who had once mocked human capabilities now listened respectfully as she outlined strategies for galactic security and cooperation. The species that had assigned humans to backwater sectors now sought human guidance in developing their own adaptability and innovation. Dr. Chun made her final research log from her laboratory on Earth, surrounded by alien colleagues who had come to study human psychology and biology. The greatest discovery of this war was not any specific technology or tactic, she recorded. It was the realization that intelligence is not about perfecting a single capability, but about maintaining the flexibility to learn and grow and become whatever circumstances require. Captain Morrison, now exploring beyond the galactic rim in search of new worlds and new challenges, received regular communications from the species humanity had helped save. Zelhari scientists shared their latest creative breakthroughs. Vorthak collectives reported on their experiments with individual expression. Nomari entities described their success with physical energy hybrid techniques. Bruthan warriors sent tactical innovations they had developed using human flexibility principles, but perhaps the most significant change was in the youngest members of each species. Zelhari children were learning to think creatively alongside technological mastery. Young Vorthak were developing individual personalities while maintaining collective bonds. Nomari adolescents were experimenting with physical forms as well as energy manipulation. Bruthan youth were studying strategy and diplomacy alongside combat training. The galaxy had learned that advancement did not require choosing between strength and flexibility, between specialization and adaptability, between individual achievement and collective cooperation. The greatest civilizations were those that could be all of these things as circumstances required. Morrison looked out at the stars, beyond the galactic rim, and smiled at the irony of how it had all begun. The aliens had laughed at humanity because they saw weakness where strength actually existed. They had dismissed human limitations without recognizing human potential. They had assigned humans to the worst sectors of the galaxy, thinking it would contain them. Instead, it had given humanity the freedom to develop in ways no other species had imagined possible. It had allowed them to become something new and unprecedented. It had let them grow into the teachers the galaxy had never known it needed. The aliens had laughed at humans before they learned to roar. Now the entire galaxy was learning to roar alongside them, creating a harmony that was stronger than any single voice could ever be. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not over any external enemy, But over the assumption that being different meant being inferior, they had proven that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is the courage to remain adaptable. In a galaxy that demands specialization, sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to learn from everyone while becoming whatever the moment requires. Sometimes the loudest roar comes not from a single throat, but from many voices raised. Together in harmony, the laughter had ended, the roaring had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Kepler system had been under siege for 3 weeks when Admiral Jake Morrison arrived with the human response fleet. The consortium forces were trapped around the system's 4th planet, their once mighty armadas reduced to desperate defensive positions. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia now limped through space with failing systems and depleted crews. Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the HSS Liberation, and surveyed the tactical situation with the calm eyes of a veteran commander. The Liberation was humanity's first true capital ship, built with 4 years of accumulated knowledge and hybrid technologies that surpassed anything the individual alien species had created. To alien observers, it looked unimpressive compared to their massive specialized vessels. "Status report," Morrison ordered as his ship dropped out of dimensional fold space. Commander Alex Turner, now serving as Morrison's tactical officer, pulled up the sensor displays. "The Devourers have deployed standard suppression tactics, electronic warfare against Vorthek coordination, energy draining against Nomari forces, adaptive countermeasures against Zelhari technology, and overwhelming force against Bruthan positions." "Alien casualties?" Morrison asked quietly. "Severe. Across all species," Turner replied. "The consortium has lost 60% of their fleet strength. They are requesting immediate evacuation support for their surviving forces." Morrison nodded and opened communications with the alien fleet commanders. The responses came quickly, filled with barely controlled panic despite attempts to maintain dignity. The Zelhari captain spoke in crystal harmonics that cracked with strain. The Vorthek collective consciousness seemed fractured and confused. The Nomari entity flickered like a dying flame. Even Gorthek, the mighty Bruthan warrior, sounded hollow and defeated. "Human Admiral," Gorthek's deep voice rumbled through the comm system, "you have arrived too late. The machines cannot be stopped. They adapt to every strategy we employ. Our weapons cannot harm them. Our defenses cannot hold them. We must evacuate what remains of our forces before all is lost." Morrison looked at his bridge crew and saw determination in every human face. These were men and women who had spent years preparing for this moment. They had trained under the assumption that they would eventually face enemies far stronger than themselves. They had learned to see disadvantage as opportunity and weakness as a chance to be creative. "Negative on the evacuation, Gorthek," Morrison replied calmly. "We are here to fight." The alien response was immediate and predictable. The same species that had dismissed human combat capabilities now tried to protect their former victims from certain destruction. The Zelhari captain's harmonics reached painful frequencies as it insisted that humans lacked the technology to engage devourer forces. The Vorthek collective projected confused concern about individual human minds facing a unified machine intelligence. The Nomari entity flickered with psychic static as it warned about energy weapons that could drain the life from any biological target. Morrison listened to their warnings with patience and then gave his orders. "All human vessels, implement battle plan adaptive storm. Show our alien friends what 4 years of preparation can accomplish." The human fleet moved into combat formation and immediately demonstrated something the Devourers had never encountered. Instead of maintaining rigid tactical structures, human ships flowed like water around the enemy positions. They coordinated without relying on external communication systems that could be jammed. They adapted their strategies in real time as battlefield conditions changed. Commander Sarah Mitchell led the first wave in her ship, the HSS Endeavour. Her crew had perfected Dr. Ross's psychic immunity training and could operate effectively, even when Devourer electronic warfare disrupted every other form of communication. They moved with practiced precision while the machines struggled to understand how biological beings could coordinate without detectable signals. The Devourers deployed their standard countermeasures and found them useless against an enemy they had no experience fighting. Electronic warfare that could shatter Vorthok hive minds had no effect on humans who communicated through gesture and instinct. Energy-draining weapons designed to kill Nomari entities barely affected biological beings, who used technology rather than becoming it. Adaptive algorithms that could counter Zelhari crystalline patterns failed against hybrid systems that changed their fundamental operating principles. Maria Santos watched the battle from her position aboard a human support vessel and felt pride in seeing her hybrid technologies perform exactly as designed. Human weapons that combine Zelhari energy manipulation with Bruthan firepower and Vorthok coordination protocols. Defense systems that merged Nomari energy absorption with human redundancy engineering. Ships that could reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements while maintaining full combat effectiveness. The turning point came when Colonel Hayes led a ground assault against Devourer manufacturing facilities on the system's second moon. His Marines demonstrated tactical flexibility that broke every assumption in machine intelligence programming. They used captured enemy technology as weapons. They turned the environment itself into a battlefield advantage. They coordinated with the fleet in three-dimensional combat patterns that created synergies no computer could calculate. But the greatest shock to Devourer systems came from something completely unexpected. Dr. Chun had discovered that human creativity could actually reprogram captured machine units in real time. The Devourers were designed to be a unified intelligence, but human engineers could isolate individual units and convince them to serve human tactical goals. The machines are designed to process known patterns, Chun explained to Morrison as the battle continued around them. They expect enemies to fight according to established galactic norms. When we do something completely unprecedented, their decision trees cannot handle the input. Morrison watched his tactical displays as human forces achieve something that had seemed impossible. The Devourers were not just being defeated, they were being confused. Machines that had conquered star systems with mathematical precision were making errors because they faced opponents who operated outside their programming parameters. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the primitive humans achieved victory after victory against enemies that had crushed their advanced civilizations. Zelhari officers began studying human tactics with new respect. Vorthok drones requested permission to learn human coordination techniques. Nomari entities asked to understand how biological minds could resist electronic warfare. Bruthan warriors demanded to know how physically weak humans could outfight mechanically superior opponents. The final phase of the battle came when Dr. Blake activated her dimensional fold technology on a scale the aliens had never imagined possible. Instead of using it for transportation, she created tactical fold points that allowed human forces to appear anywhere on the battlefield instantly. The Devourers found themselves fighting an enemy that could be everywhere at once while maintaining perfect coordination. When the last Devourer unit finally retreated from the Kepler system, the silence that followed was profound. For the first time since the machine threat had emerged, an entire enemy fleet had been not just defeated but completely routed. The aliens who had ruled the galaxy for millennia looked at their human rescuers with expressions that mixed gratitude with bewilderment. Morrison opened communications with all ships in the system and spoke words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. To our consortium allies, the immediate threat has been neutralized. The Devourers have learned that there are still surprises in this galaxy. To any machine intelligence that might be listening, understand this. You may have cataloged the 4 known species, but you have never faced humanity. We are what happens when a species refuses to be limited by what others think is possible. The roar that echoed through space that day was not the sound of weapons or engines. It was the sound of a species that had been laughed at and dismissed finally showing the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The aliens had underestimated humanity because they saw only primitive technology and individual weakness. They had failed to understand that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from perfection, but from the ability to adapt and grow and become whatever the situation requires. 4 years after first contact, the galaxy faced a threat unlike anything in recorded history. The Devourers emerged from the dark spaces between star systems like a plague of metal and destruction. They were not a species, but a machine intelligence that consumed entire worlds to fuel its endless expansion. Solar systems that had existed for billions of years vanished in weeks, reduced to raw materials for the growing mechanical army. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a small human fleet, received the first distress calls from Consortium space with a mixture of concern and dark satisfaction. The same aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive children were now crying for help. Their superior technology and ancient civilizations were crumbling before an enemy they could not understand or defeat. Morrison read the official communication from the Zalhari High Council with careful attention to every word. The crystalline beings tried to maintain their air of superiority even while begging for assistance. The consortium requests minimal human participation in evacuation efforts, the message stated. Human vessels may be suitable for transporting civilian populations while more capable forces engage the primary threat. The message was clear. The aliens still saw humans as useful only for menial support roles. They wanted human ships to serve as refugee transports while the real warriors handled the fighting. It was exactly the kind of condescending attitude that had marked every interaction between humanity and the consortium since first contact. But General Patricia Stone had spent 4 years preparing for exactly this moment. She stood in the command center of Earth's new orbital fortress, watching tactical displays that showed the scale of the Devour threat. The machines were advancing on multiple fronts, adapting to every strategy the consortium deployed. The aliens' specialized advantages were becoming liabilities against an enemy that learned and evolved faster than they could counter. The Zalhari are trying to use their crystal technology to create defensive networks, reported Dr. Susan Blake from her position at the science station. Blake had spent years perfecting dimensional fold technology based on principles the aliens had missed. The Devourers are analyzing their energy patterns and developing specific countermeasures for each new defense. The Vorthek hive mind is struggling with electronic warfare, added Dr. Kevin Ross from the communications console. The machines are targeting their psychic links and disrupting their coordination. Individual Vorthag cannot function effectively when separated from the collective consciousness. Commander Sarah Mitchell's voice came through the CUM system from her ship in patrol formation. The Nomari are suffering massive casualties. Their energy forms are vulnerable to the Devourer's power-draining weapons. They cannot maintain coherent existence near the machines. Colonel Bill Hayes entered the command center with a grim expression on his weathered face. The Bruthen are throwing everything they have at the Devourers in direct assault. Their strength and armor mean nothing against enemies that can rebuild faster than they can be destroyed. Gorthic's entire battle group was eliminated in the Antares system yesterday. Stone absorbed all of this information and felt the cold certainty. That had been growing in her mind for months. The consortium was losing this war because they were fighting it the wrong way. Each species was using their greatest strength against an enemy specifically designed to counter known galactic capabilities. The Devourers had encountered the 4 major species before, and had learned to defeat them, but the machines had never encountered humanity. Activate Project Silent Thunder, Stone ordered. Full deployment. It is time to show the galaxy what humans have learned. The response was immediate and coordinated. Across human space, ships and personnel that had been quietly preparing for years began to move. Dr. Blake's dimensional fold drives allowed human forces to appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours rather than weeks. The aliens had no idea that humanity possessed technology that could match their own transportation capabilities. Maria Santos coordinated the deployment of hybrid weapons and defensive systems from her production facilities on New Pittsburgh. The devices her teams had created combined the best aspects of all 4 alien technologies while adding human innovations that none of the original species had imagined. Weapons that could adapt their function in real time. Shields that learned from attacks and became stronger. Ships that could change their entire configuration based on battlefield requirements. Dr. Ross led teams of psychically immune humans to assist Nomari and Vorthak forces that were being overwhelmed by electronic warfare. The aliens had always seen human psychic deafness as a limitation, but against an enemy that attacked minds directly, it became humanity's greatest defensive advantage. Colonel Hayes deployed Marine units trained in adaptive combat doctrines throughout consortium space. Human soldiers who could coordinate without relying on technology or psychic links. Warriors who saw every environment as a potential weapon and every disadvantage as an opportunity to be creative. But the greatest weapon in humanity's arsenal was something the aliens had never understood. Humans could work together while maintaining their individuality. They could specialize when needed but adapt when circumstances changed. They could learn from other species while developing their own innovations. The first major test came when Morrison led a combined human-alien fleet to defend the Vega system. The consortium forces were in full retreat when the humans arrived, their rigid tactics and specialized approaches completely countered by devourer adaptations. The alien commanders expected the humans to follow established military doctrine and support their withdrawal. Instead, Morrison ordered something unprecedented. Human ships began coordinating directly with individual alien vessels, bypassing the traditional command structures that the devourers had learned to disrupt. Zelhari crystal ships found themselves working with human hybrid technology to create defensive networks that adapted faster than the machines could counter them. Vorthok forces discovered that human coordination techniques allowed them to maintain unit cohesion even when their psychic links were disrupted. Nomari entities learned to use human-designed energy storage devices to maintain their existence near power-draining weapons. Bruthan warriors fought alongside human marines who showed them how to use terrain and tactics rather than relying solely on strength. The battle for Vega lasted 3 days and ended with something that had not happened since the Devourer threat began. The machines were forced to retreat. For the first time, they faced opponents who could adapt and coordinate and learn faster than their programming could compensate. News of the victory spread throughout consortium space like wildfire. The same species that had laughed at human primitiveness now demanded to know how the backward humans had achieved what their advanced civilizations could not. Requests for human assistance came from every corner of the galaxy, but Stone was not ready to reveal the full extent of human capabilities. She authorized limited cooperation while keeping humanity's greatest advantages hidden. Let the aliens think human success was luck or desperation. Let them continue to underestimate human potential while learning to depend on human assistance. Dr. Chun, now serving as humanity's chief xenobiologist, made a discovery that changed everything. Her analysis of captured devourer technology revealed the machine's greatest weakness. They were designed to counter the 4 known galactic species based on thousands of years of observational data. Their programming assumed that any spacefaring civilization would follow one of the 4 established patterns. Humanity followed none of those patterns. Humans were generalists in a galaxy of specialists. They were adaptable in a universe that valued rigid perfection. They were individual, yet cooperative in ways that no machine intelligence had been programmed to understand. The Devourers cannot process us, Chun explained to Stone during a secure briefing. Their entire operational framework is based on predictable enemy behavior. We are literally outside their comprehension parameters. Stone smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Humanity had been given a gift by the very aliens who had dismissed them. By being assigned to the galactic backwaters, humans had developed an isolation from the established patterns that defined galactic civilization. They had become something new and unprecedented, something the Devourers were not prepared to face. 2 years had passed since humanity's introduction to galactic civilization, and things had changed in ways the aliens never noticed. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the HSS Endeavour, watching a Nomari vessel approach through the viewport. Mitchell was a calm woman with brown hair and steady hands who had learned to hide her thoughts behind a pleasant smile. Today that skill would be put to the test. The joint mission was supposed to be routine exploration of an uncharted system. The Nomari captain, Veltar, had made it clear through psychic communication that he considered this babysitting duty. Humans were still seen as children who needed supervision when venturing into dangerous space. Veltar's golden energy form flickered with boredom as his ship took the lead position. What Veltar did not know was that Mitchell's crew had spent months training for this exact situation. Dr. Kevin Ross had developed something the aliens thought impossible. Ross was a quiet man with thick glasses and a mind that worked in ways that puzzled even other humans. He had combined ancient meditation techniques with cutting-edge neural implants to create complete immunity to psychic influence. Every member of Mitchell's crew carried Ross's implants. They had trained their minds to resist mental intrusion, while maintaining perfect coordination through old-fashioned communication and trust. The Nomari had dismissed human psychic deafness as a primitive limitation. They had no idea it could be turned into an advantage. The two ships entered the uncharted system and immediately encountered something unexpected. Space itself seemed twisted around the fourth planet, creating gravitational anomalies and energy discharges that made normal navigation impossible. Worse, something about the distortions was affecting the Nomari's psychic abilities. Veltar's mental voice became strained and confused as feedback from the anomaly scrambled his thoughts. This phenomenon is interfering with proper cognitive function. His psychic projection wavered with static. All energy-based life forms are experiencing severe disorientation. The Nomari ship began to drift as its crew lost coordination. Their psychic links, which had allowed perfect unity for millennia, were being disrupted by the strange energies surrounding the planet. Panic spread through their collective consciousness as individual Nomari found themselves truly alone for the first time in their existence. Mitchell watched the alien ship's erratic movements and made her decision. All hands, this is the captain. We are going to rescue our alien friends. Remember your training and stay focused? The Endeavor moved smoothly through the dangerous space around the planet. Mitchell's crew worked with practiced efficiency, their minds clear and unaffected by the psychic interference. They had trained for situations where communication systems might fail, where normal coordination methods might not work. Now that training paid off. Using magnetic grapples and careful maneuvering, the human ship managed to pull the Nomari vessel clear of the anomaly's effects. As soon as they reached safe distance, Veltar's psychic voice returned to normal, though it carried a note of confusion. "How did you navigate through that disturbance?" the Nomari captain asked. "Your minds should have been as affected as ours, unless... There was a long pause as Veltar tried to understand what had happened. "Your psychic deafness protected you. What we thought was a limitation actually made you immune to the interference." Mitchell smiled politely and gave a diplomatic answer about human adaptability, but she did not explain the real truth. Humans were not naturally immune to psychic influence, but they had made themselves immune through science and training. The aliens continued to see only what they expected to see. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, engineer Maria Santos was achieving her own breakthrough. Santos was a small woman with oil-stained coveralls and hands that could build anything she could imagine. For months she had been studying broken alien technology, trying to understand how it worked. Now she was ready to make it work better. The workshop around Santos was filled with hybrid devices that combined human creativity with alien science. She had taken Zalhari crystal technology and found ways to make it more flexible. She had improved Vortha coordination systems by adding human-style redundancy. She had enhanced Bruthan weapons by making them adaptable rather than specialized. Her greatest success was a device that should not have been possible. By combining energy manipulation techniques from all four alien species with human engineering principles, Santos had created a tool that could adapt its function in real time. It could serve as a scanner, a weapon, a shield, or a construction device depending on what was needed. The breakthrough came when Santos realized that alien technology was designed by specialists for specialists. Each species built tools that maximized their particular strengths but ignored other possibilities. Human creativity allowed her to see potential that the original creators had missed, light years away on the training world of New Sparta. Colonel Bill Hayes was proving that human military doctrine could be just as revolutionary as human technology. Hayes was a lean man with sharp eyes and a strategic mind that thought in 3 dimensions. He had spent his career studying warfare and had come to understand that the greatest victories came from doing what the enemy did not expect. The Bruthan warrior Gorthik had come to observe human combat training, expecting to see primitive techniques that his people could easily counter. Instead, he watched human Marines practicing something completely different from traditional warfare. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles and adapting to changing conditions. They used their environment as a weapon and turned their own weaknesses into advantages. "Your warriors are small and weak," Gorthik observed as he watched the exercises. "They avoid direct confrontation with stronger opponents. This is cowardice." Hayes smiled and gestured to the training ground. "Would you like to demonstrate proper combat techniques?" honored Gorthik. "My Marines would be interested to learn from a Bruthan warrior." Gorthik's yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation. He entered the training area confident that his superior strength and armor would make this a quick lesson. The human Marines faced him with weapons that seemed inadequate and tactics that made no sense. The fight was over in minutes, but not the way Gorthik expected. The humans did not try to match his strength or face him directly. Instead, they used the terrain, their technology, and their coordination to control the battle. They attacked from unexpected angles, used non-lethal weapons that bypassed his armor, and worked together in ways that confused his straightforward tactical thinking. When the exercise ended, Gorthik found himself immobilized by restraint fields, entangled in nets that had appeared from nowhere. He had not been hurt, but he had been completely neutralized by opponents he could have crushed individually. "How?" Gorthik asked with genuine confusion. "You are weak. I am strong. This outcome makes no sense." Hayes helped the alien warrior to his feet and smiled. "Strength is important, but it is not everything. Sometimes the greatest power comes from knowing how to use what you have in ways your opponent does not expect." Back on Earth, General Stone received reports from across human space and felt a grim satisfaction. Project Silent Thunder was ahead of schedule. Dr. Blake had successfully created humanity's first dimensional full drive based on her studies of the phenomenon the Zelhari had dismissed. The technology allowed travel times that matched the aliens' best transportation methods, and Blake believed even greater advances were possible. Dr. Ross had perfected psychic immunity training that could be taught to any human willing to learn. Maria Santos had established production facilities for hybrid technologies that surpassed anything the individual alien species had created. Colonel Hayes had developed military doctrines that turned human adaptability into tactical superiority. Most importantly, humanity had learned to work together in ways that none of the alien species could match. The Zelhari were isolated by their crystalline perfection. The Vorthak were unified but inflexible. The Namari were connected but vulnerable. The Bruthan were strong but predictable. Humans were messy and chaotic and individual, but they could coordinate when needed while maintaining the flexibility to adapt when plans changed. They could specialize when required but switch roles when circumstances demanded it. They could be weak when strength was not needed and strong when weakness would be defeat. Stone looked at the star charts that showed humanity's assigned sectors and smiled coldly. The aliens had given humans the worst parts of the galaxy, thinking it would contain and limit them. Instead, it had given humanity room to grow and experiment and prepare without interference. The aliens still saw humans as primitive children, playing with toys. They had no idea that those children had been learning to build weapons that could shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Soon they would discover their mistake. Soon they would learn what happened when you underestimated humanity. 6 months had passed since humanity's humiliating introduction to galactic civilization. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner guided his ship, the HSS Defiant, Through the outer rim sectors that had become humanity's new home, the stars here were older and dimmer than those near Earth. The planets were harsh and unforgiving. It was exactly the kind of place the aliens expected humans to fail and disappear. Turner was a young officer with sandy brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. He had grown up dreaming of exploring the stars and meeting alien civilizations. Reality had been much different than his dreams. Instead of wonder and friendship, humanity had found condescension and dismissal. But Turner had learned something important in these past months. Being underestimated could be an advantage if you were smart enough to use it. The Defiant sensors picked up an energy signature that made Dr. Susan Blake look up from her instruments with excitement. Blake was the ship's physicist, a brilliant woman with red hair and freckles who had spent years studying the theoretical physics that made faster-than-light travel possible. What she was seeing on her screens made her heart race. "Commander Turner," Blake called out from her station. "I am reading some kind of spatial distortion about 2 million kilometers off our port bow. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Turner ordered the ship to investigate. As they approached the phenomenon, they found a Zelhari science vessel already studying it. The crystalline ship was beautiful in its alien way, with surfaces that reflected light in patterns that seemed to have meaning. Turner opened communications and requested permission to observe. The response came in those musical tones that always made human teeth ache. "This is Captain Crickstal of the research vessel Harmony. We are studying a complex dimensional phenomenon that is far beyond human understanding. Perhaps you should return to your assigned patrol routes and leave real science to those capable of comprehending it." Turner kept his voice polite and respectful. "We understand, Captain. We are just curious about what you have discovered. Would you mind if we observed from a safe distance?" The Zelhari captain's amusement was clear in the harmonious laughter that came through the CUM system. "Very well, little humans. You may watch and perhaps learn something, though I doubt your primitive minds can grasp the true significance of what we are studying." The Defiant took position several thousand kilometers away and began passive scans. What Dr. Blake saw made her grab Turner's arm with excitement. The phenomenon was a dimensional fold, a natural occurrence where space-time bent back on itself. She had written papers about this theoretical possibility back on Earth. If it could be understood and controlled, it would allow for instantaneous travel across vast distances. Blake watched the Zelhari ship's scanning patterns and shook her head in frustration. They were approaching the problem all wrong. Their technology was advanced, but their thinking was rigid. They were trying to analyze the fold using conventional physics when what was needed was a completely different approach. "Commander," Blake whispered, "they have no idea what they are really looking at. This is not just an energy phenomenon. It is a doorway through space itself. If we could learn to create these artificially, we could travel anywhere in the galaxy instantly." Turner looked at the readings Blake was showing him. Even with his limited scientific training, he could see possibilities that the Zelhari were missing. "Can you study it without them noticing?" "Already am," Blake smiled. "They think our scanners are too primitive to gather useful data. They are wrong." Meanwhile, light years away on the human colony of New Denver, former Marine Ryan Parker was having his own moment of discovery. Parker was a big man with calloused hands and a practical mind who had volunteered to help establish humanity's first settlements in their assigned sectors. He was studying the local wildlife when he noticed something the alien inspectors had missed. The creatures on New Denver were tougher than they had any right to be. They survived in conditions that should have killed them. They adapted to changes in their environment faster than evolution should allow. Parker had seen similar traits in Earth's extremophiles, the tiny organisms that thrived in places like deep ocean vents and polar ice, when a Vorthak inspection team arrived to check on the colony's progress. Parker tried to share his observations. The insectoid beings listened with their compound eyes glittering in what might have been amusement. "Human Parker," the lead Vorthak clicked in its glass-breaking voice. "You display typical human anthropomorphism. You see patterns where none exist because your individual minds cannot process complex ecosystems. These are simple creatures adapted to simple environments. There is nothing remarkable here. Parker nodded and smiled but made no effort to argue. He had learned that the aliens only heard what they expected to hear. They saw humanity as primitive and individual, so they dismissed human observations as wishful thinking. But Parker kept studying the creatures and documenting their remarkable abilities. Back on Earth, General Patricia Stone sat in her office reading reports from human settlements across their assigned sectors. Stone was a tough woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. She had spent her career preparing for threats that might never come. Now she was preparing for threats that definitely would come, the reports painted an interesting picture. Everywhere humans went, they found things the aliens had overlooked or dismissed. Natural phenomena that could be harnessed. Biological adaptations that could be studied and copied. Resources that had been ignored because they did not fit alien patterns of thinking. Stone opened a new file on her computer and began typing. Project Silent Thunder was born in that moment, though she did not give it a name yet. She began making lists of the brightest human minds scattered across their new territories. Scientists who were asking the right questions. Engineers who were solving problems in new ways. Soldiers who were learning to fight battles the aliens could not imagine. Dr. Chun arrived at Stone's office the next day with her own discoveries. She had been studying the 4 alien species since first contact, not just their biology but their psychology and behavior patterns. What she had found was both encouraging and terrifying. General, Chun said as she spread her notes across Stone's desk, each alien species has incredible strengths, but they also have corresponding weaknesses. The Zelhari are technologically superior, but they cannot think creatively. Their crystalline minds work in rigid patterns. The Vorthak have perfect coordination, but they cannot adapt when unexpected things happen. The Nomari can read thoughts, but they depend too much on mental communication. The Bruthan are incredibly strong, but their tactics are predictable. Stone studied the notes and felt a cold smile cross her face. And humans? Humans are generalists. Chun continued. We are not the best at anything specific, but we can do everything reasonably well. More importantly, we can adapt and learn and change our approach when needed. The aliens see this as weakness because they value specialization. But in the right circumstances, being adaptable is better than being specialized. Stone nodded and made her decision. Start quietly reaching out to our best people. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, thinkers. I want teams working on every one of these alien weaknesses. But more importantly, I want teams working on human strengths. As the months passed, a quiet revolution began in human space. While the aliens continued to see humans as harmless primitives playing at civilization, humanity was actually learning and growing and preparing. They studied alien technology not to copy it, but to understand it and improve upon it. They analyzed alien tactics not to mimic them, but to find ways to counter them. The aliens had made humanity's first mistake for them. They had underestimated their opponents. They had assumed that being primitive meant being helpless. They had looked at humanity's lack of specialization and seen only weakness. They had not considered that the greatest strength might be the ability to become whatever the situation required. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the HSS Explorer and watched the stars change as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The year was 2387 and humanity had finally achieved something they had dreamed about for centuries. They could travel between the stars. They were no longer alone in the universe. Today would be the day humans met their galactic neighbors for the first time. Dr. Lisa Chun walked up to Morrison with her tablet in hand. She had been studying alien biology for months, preparing for this moment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes showed both excitement and worry. She had read all the reports about the 4 alien species that ruled the galaxy. The Zelhari were made of living crystal and had technology beyond human understanding. The Vorthak were like giant insects that shared one mind across millions of bodies. The Nomari were beings of pure energy who could read thoughts. The Bruthen were massive lizard-like warriors with incredible strength. "Captain, we are getting signals from Nexus Prime," Chun said as she looked at her readings. "The alien representatives are already waiting for us." Morrison nodded and straightened his uniform. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and steady blue eyes. He had served in Earth's Navy for 20 years before joining the space program. Today he would represent all of humanity in their first official meeting with galactic civilization. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. The Explorer docked at Nexus Prime, a massive space station that served as neutral ground for diplomatic meetings. Morrison and his small team walked through corridors that seemed impossibly large. Everything was built to accommodate species much different from humans. The walls were covered in symbols and lights that meant nothing to human eyes. Ambassador Richard Hayes led the human delegation. He was an older man with white hair and a calm manner that had served him well in Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind him walked Dr. Chun and 3 other specialists. They all wore their best uniforms, but Morrison could see the nervousness in their movements. They were about to meet beings that could destroy Earth without breaking a sweat. The meeting room was enormous. In the center sat 4 alien representatives, each one stranger than anything humans had imagined. The Zelhari delegate looked like a walking sculpture made of blue crystal. Light moved through its body in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the sound came as musical tones that somehow formed words in the human mind. "So, these are the new creatures," the Zelhari said with clear amusement in its voice. "Such simple beings. They fly in metal tubes and think they have mastered space travel. How amusing." The Vorthic representative was worse. It looked like a praying mantis the size of a human, but with too many eyes and arms that ended in sharp claws when it moved. Morrison could see thousands of smaller versions of itself moving in perfect coordination through the station's windows. The creature's compound eyes studied the humans like they were insects under a microscope. "Individual minds," the Vorthek clicked in a voice like breaking glass. "How do they coordinate anything? They have no unity, no shared purpose. They are chaos given form." The Nomari entity was hardest to look at because it kept changing shape. Sometimes it looked like a person made of golden light. Other times it appeared as swirling energy with no fixed form. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in the humans' minds without passing through their ears. "They cannot even hear the thoughts of others," the Nomari projected with something like pity. "They are deaf to the true language of intelligent life. How do they share knowledge or emotion? They are isolated islands of consciousness." The Bruthen warrior was the most physically intimidating. Gorthik stood almost 8 feet tall with scales like armor and muscles that could crush steel. His yellow eyes looked at the humans and he actually laughed. The sound was deep and rumbling like distant thunder. "These soft pink things think they can survive in the galaxy," Gorthik said while showing teeth like daggers. "Look at them. No claws, no armor, no real strength. A child of my people could break all of them without effort." Ambassador Hayes kept his composure through all of this mockery. He presented Earth's request to join galactic civilization and explained humanity's peaceful intentions. The aliens listened with barely hidden contempt. When Hayes finished speaking, the Zelhari delegate made its decision. "We will allow these humans to exist in our galaxy," it said like it was granting a great favor. "They may settle in the outer rim sectors where they cannot interfere with important matters. Let them play at being space travelers while the real civilizations handle galactic affairs." The meeting ended with humanity being assigned to the worst parts of the galaxy. Sectors with few resources, no strategic value, and far from the major trade routes. The aliens made it clear that humans were welcome to pretend they belonged among the stars, but they should leave real decisions to their betters, back on the Explorer. Morrison watched the alien representatives leave without a single gesture of respect or friendship. Dr. Chen stood beside him, her hands clenched into fists. The other team members were quiet, processing what they had just experienced. "They think we are nothing," Chen said quietly. Less than nothing. They see us as pets or children playing with toys. Morrison looked out at the stars and felt something growing in his chest. It was not anger, though anger was part of it. It was determination. The aliens had looked at humanity and seen weakness. They had seen limitations. They had seen beings unworthy of respect. They had made a mistake.